Royal Guard loses composure after a shocking revelation inside the palace. Emotional stories. He had stood at the palace gates for so many years that people believed he was part of the stone itself. Tall, straight, and always silent, the Royal Guard was known for one thing above all else: control. No matter what happened around him, his face never showed emotion. Joy, fear, anger, or surprise never crossed his eyes. Other guards joked that even if the sky fell, he would still stand calmly at his post. He woke up every morning before dawn. His routine never changed. He washed, dressed in his perfectly pressed uniform, checked his boots, and adjusted his cap until it sat just right. Each movement was practiced, careful, and exact. Discipline was not just his job, it was his life. By the time the palace corridors filled with servants and officials, he was already standing tall, alert, and ready. The palace was a place of beauty and power. Long hallways shined under soft lights. Walls carried the history of generations. Important people passed by every day: royals, advisors, guests from faraway lands. Yet the guard never looked at them with curiosity. His eyes stayed forward. His duty was protection, not interest. He had learned long ago that emotions could weaken a man in uniform. Among the guards, he was respected. Younger guards watched him closely, trying to copy the way he stood and moved. Senior officers trusted him without question. If he was on duty, they knew everything would remain calm. He never raised his voice. He never lost focus. Even during tense moments when arguments broke out or unexpected situations arose, he stayed steady. It was as if nothing could shake him. But what no one knew was that this calm was not natural. It was built over many years, layer by layer, like armor around his heart. Before the palace, before the uniform, before the title of Royal Guard, he had been someone else. A regular man with a regular life. A man who once laughed easily. A man who trusted deeply. Those days felt like they belonged to another lifetime. Something had happened long ago, something painful enough to change him forever. Since then, he had locked those memories away. He never spoke about his past. No photos, no stories, no visits from family. When asked, he simply said he had no one. Inside the palace, days passed in the same way. Morning inspections, guard changes, ceremonies, quiet evenings. He liked the routine. Routine left no room for thinking. Thinking led to memories, and memories led to pain. As long as every day looked like the one before it, he felt safe. Sometimes, as he stood in long silence, sounds echoed through the halls: soft music, distant laughter, the quiet steps of servants. Life moved around him, but he remained still. He told himself that this was strength. To feel nothing meant nothing could hurt him. On this particular day, everything seemed normal. The sun rose gently, casting light across the palace walls. The guard took his position near the main inner corridor, one of the most important areas. It was a trusted post, given only to those with perfect records. He stood straight, eyes forward, hands steady. People passed him without a second glance. To them, he was just another guard, a symbol of order. No one wondered what he felt inside. No one imagined that behind that calm face was a heart that had once been broken. As hours passed, a group of palace staff walked by, speaking quietly among themselves. Normally, he would not notice, but a few words reached his ears, carried by the air. A name. He froze, not in body but in mind. The name was common, yet the way it was spoken made his chest tighten. He told himself it meant nothing. Many people shared the same name. Still, something about it disturbed him. He forced his breathing to stay even. His posture did not change. No one noticed anything unusual. He reminded himself of where he was. This was the palace, a place of duty, not memories. The staff moved on, their voices fading. Silence returned. The guard stood alone again, but the calm he relied on felt thinner than before, like a wall with small cracks forming. He pushed the feeling away. He had done this many times. Thoughts came and he locked them out. That was his strength. As the day continued, a senior officer stopped briefly near him, giving instructions about upcoming schedules. The guard listened carefully and nodded once. His voice, when he replied, was calm and respectful. No one could tell that inside something was stirring. The officer walked away, satisfied. The guard returned to his stillness, yet the name echoed again in his mind, louder this time. He had not heard it spoken in years, not since the day his life changed. He remembered standing in a very different place back then. No uniform, no palace, just a moment that had taken everything from him. He swallowed hard, though his face remained unchanged. He told himself that the past was buried. He had made sure of it. Whatever happened back then had nothing to do with his life now. Still, as evening approached, the air inside the palace felt heavier. The corridors seemed longer, the silence deeper. He noticed small things he usually ignored, the sound of his own breathing, the slow passing of time, the way his hands felt slightly tense. This was new. He did not like it. When his shift ended, he handed over his position with the same professionalism as always. Other guards greeted him, some nodding with respect. One of them made a light comment, trying to start a conversation. The guard replied briefly, politely, and moved on. In his private quarters, he removed his uniform carefully and placed it exactly where it belonged. He sat on the edge of his bed for a moment, staring at the wall. The room was simple. No personal items, no reminders of a life outside the palace. He closed his eyes. For a brief second, memories pushed forward, faces, voices, promises once made. His jaw tightened. He opened his eyes again and stood up. He would not allow himself to feel. Tomorrow would be another day of duty, another day of silence. He did not know it yet, but the palace he trusted was already beginning to test him. The calm he had protected for so long was standing on fragile ground, and the name he heard was not a coincidence. It was the beginning of a truth that would soon demand to be faced. The next morning began like every other morning, yet something felt different from the moment he opened his eyes. The guard rose before dawn as usual, washed his face, and put on his uniform with careful hands. Every button was fixed perfectly, every fold smooth. Still, his mind was not as quiet as it normally was. The name he had heard the day before returned again and again, like a soft knock on a door he had sealed shut years ago. He pushed the thought away as he stepped into the palace corridors. The familiar scent of polished floors and fresh air greeted him. Servants moved quietly, keeping their eyes low. Lamps glowed gently along the walls. Everything looked the same, yet the guard felt as if he were walking through a place he was seeing for the first time. During the morning inspection, senior officers spoke about routine matters. The guard listened closely, answering only when spoken to. His voice was steady, his posture firm. No one noticed anything unusual. That was how he preferred it. After the inspection, an officer approached him with new instructions. The guard was told he would be assigned to a restricted inner section of the palace for the next few days. It was an area reserved for important meetings and private matters of the royal household. Few guards were chosen for this duty, and even fewer were trusted to remain silent about what they might see or hear. The guard nodded and accepted the assignment without question. Inside, however, a quiet unease grew. He had served many years, yet he had rarely been posted in that part of the palace. It was a place of secrets, where walls seemed to listen and silence carried weight. As he walked toward his new post, he noticed the change immediately. The corridors were narrower, the doors heavier. The air felt still, as if even sound was careful not to travel too far. Staff members moved more slowly here, their voices lower than usual. Some avoided eye contact, while others glanced at him briefly before looking away. He took his position near a tall wooden door, carved with fine details. According to his orders, he was to stand guard there until relieved. Nothing more. Nothing less. Time passed slowly. He focused on his breathing, keeping it even. He reminded himself that duty was all that mattered. Still, he could not ignore the strange feeling settling in his chest. From behind the door, soft voices occasionally drifted out. He did not try to listen. He had trained himself long ago to hear without hearing, to exist without reacting. But this time, certain sounds slipped through his defenses. A familiar tone, a pause. Then a voice mentioned dates and places that stirred something deep inside him. His fingers tightened slightly, then relaxed. He told himself it was coincidence. Palaces were full of stories, full of lives crossing paths in unexpected ways. Footsteps approached. Two senior staff members walked past him, speaking quietly. As they moved closer, he caught fragments of their conversation. They spoke carefully, as if afraid the walls might remember their words. Again, the name. This time, there was no denying it. The guard felt a sudden heaviness in his chest. His heartbeat quickened, though his face remained calm. He stared straight ahead, every muscle holding its place. Inside his mind, memories stirred like dust rising from the floor after years of stillness. He remembered a small home far from the palace. He remembered promises made under open skies. He remembered a moment when everything had fallen apart, leaving him with nothing but silence and regret. The staff members passed by, unaware of the storm they had stirred. The corridor grew quiet again. For the first time in years, the guard felt uncertain at his post. He wondered why this name kept appearing now after so long. He wondered why he had been assigned to this place at this time. The thought unsettled him, but he did not allow it to show. Hours later, a shift change approached, but instead of being relieved, he was instructed to remain. Another guard came to stand nearby, farther down the corridor. The guard remained at the carved door, unmoving. As evening drew near, the door behind him opened briefly. A group of important figures exited, their faces serious. He stepped aside as required, lowering his gaze respectfully. One person lingered for a moment, speaking quietly to another before moving on. The guard caught a glimpse of a face in that brief moment. It was not fully clear, but something about it struck him. A feeling of recognition washed over him, sharp and unexpected. He swallowed slowly. Once the corridor cleared, silence returned. The lamps were lit, casting long shadows along the walls. The guard felt as though the palace itself was watching him. He began to question the control he had always trusted. For years, he believed that by locking away his past, he had mastered it. Now it seemed the past had found a way back in, slipping through cracks he did not know existed. When his duty finally ended, he left the intersection with measured steps. Other guards greeted him, but he offered only brief replies. His mind was too full for conversation. In his quarters, he removed his uniform and sat quietly. He did not turn on the lamp right away. He sat in the dim light, listening to the steady rhythm of his own breathing. He asked himself questions he had avoided for years. Why now? Why here? What truth was hiding behind that name? Sleep did not come easily that night. Each time he closed his eyes, fragments of memory returned. A voice he had not heard in years. A choice that had changed everything. A silence that had lasted too long. By morning, he rose with a heavy heart but the same disciplined movements. He dressed, adjusted his uniform, and prepared to return to duty. Whatever was happening, he knew one thing clearly. The palace was no longer just a place of duty. It had become a place where his past and present were slowly moving toward each other. And he sensed that the truth waiting ahead would not remain hidden much longer. The third day began with a silence that felt heavier than before. The guard woke early, but this time his sleep had been shallow. His mind had not rested. Dreams had come and gone, filled with half-remembered faces and places he thought he had forgotten. When he opened his eyes, he lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet of his room. He sat up and took a slow breath. He reminded himself who he was now, a royal guard, a man of duty. Whatever thoughts tried to rise, He would control them as he always had. He dressed carefully, smoothing his uniform, checking every detail. The mirror reflected the same calm face the palace had always known, no sign of the storm inside. He gave a small nod to himself and stepped out into the corridor. The palace was already awake. Soft footsteps echoed, doors opened and closed, voices murmured politely. He walked toward the inner section again, his steps steady. Yet with each step, his chest felt tighter, as if he were moving closer to something he could no longer avoid. When he reached his assigned post near the carved door, he stood tall and still. The other guards nodded to him respectfully. None of them noticed the change within him. To them, he was the same man he had always been. Time passed slowly. The lamps burned steadily. The air felt thick with quiet tension. Then the door behind him opened. He did not turn, but his senses sharpened. He heard footsteps, measured, careful. Voices followed, low and controlled. He kept his eyes forward, but his mind focused on every sound. One voice stood out. It was not loud. It did not need to be. Something in its tone sent a sharp feeling through his chest. He had not heard that voice in many years, yet his body recognized it before his mind could fully accept it. His breathing faltered for a single second. The voice spoke again, mentioning a place from long ago, a place the guard had once called home. The world seemed to narrow around him. The polished floor beneath his boots felt distant. The walls felt closer. He was standing in the palace, yet his mind was pulled back to another time, another life. Memories he had locked away began to break free. He remembered a younger version of himself, full of plans and hope. He remembered standing beside someone he trusted completely. He remembered a promise made during a quiet evening, believing the future was certain. Then he remembered the day everything ended, a misunderstanding. A silence that lasted too long, a decision made without all the truth. He had walked away believing it was the only choice. By the time he realized his mistake, it was too late. The door opened wider. The voices moved closer. He caught a glimpse of the person as they passed. His heart stopped. It was them. Older, changed by time, but unmistakable. For a moment the guard felt as though the ground had shifted beneath him. His hands trembled slightly at his sides. He tightened his fingers, forcing them still. Years of training held his body in place, even as his heart struggled to keep its rhythm. The person walked past without looking at him. They did not recognize him. That fact hurt more than he expected. He stood there, unmoving, as the footsteps faded down the corridor. The door closed again, sealing the space behind him. Silence returned, but it no longer felt peaceful. It felt heavy, full of unspoken truth. The guard swallowed slowly. His eyes burned, though no tears fell. He had not allowed himself to cry in years. He would not start now. But inside, something had broken. All the questions he had avoided now stood clearly before him. The name, the timing, the assignment. It was no coincidence. Fate, or something like it, had brought them under the same roof again. He felt both relief and fear. Relief because the mystery was finally clear. Fear because he did not know what to do with the truth. He stood there for the rest of his shift, though time lost its meaning. People passed by, conversations flowed, duties continued. The palace carried on as it always had. No one noticed the guard who was quietly coming apart inside his uniform. When he was finally relieved, he walked away with controlled steps. His face remained calm. His voice, when he greeted others, was steady. Years of habit protected him from showing anything. Back in his quarters, he closed the door and leaned against it. For a long moment, he did not move. The room felt smaller than usual. The silence pressed against him. He crossed the room and sat on the edge of his bed. His hands rested on his knees, clenched tightly. He stared at the floor, replaying the moment again and again. Seeing that face had reopened wounds he thought were healed. He realized now that they had never healed at all. They had only been hidden. He thought about the life he might have had if things had gone differently. He thought about the choice he made, believing it was right at the time. He had told himself that walking away had been an act of strength. Now he was no longer sure. He felt guilt rise slowly, like a tide he could not stop. He had built his life around duty and silence to escape this feeling. Yet here it was, waiting patiently for him all these years. The guard pressed his palms together, steadying his breath. He could not undo the past. But now that the truth was before him, he could not pretend it did not exist. That night, he did not sleep. He sat in the dark, listening to the distant sounds of the palace. Every sound reminded him that the person from his past was somewhere within these walls. So close, yet separated by years of silence and choices made. By morning, his face showed no sign of the long night. He washed, dressed, and returned to duty as always. But something had changed. The calm he once relied on was gone. In its place was a quiet understanding that his life was no longer under his full control. The truth had entered his world, and it would not leave quietly. As he took his position once more, he knew that the hardest part was yet to come. Facing danger had always been easy for him. Facing his own past would be far more difficult. And deep inside, he knew that whatever happened next would change him forever. The days that followed felt slower, as if time itself had decided to test his patience. The guard returned to his duties each morning with the same careful steps and the same calm face. To everyone around him, nothing had changed. He stood tall, followed orders, and spoke only when needed. Yet inside, his thoughts no longer stayed quiet. Every corridor reminded him of that brief moment when he had seen the face from his past. Every soft footstep made him wonder if they were near. The palace, once a place of order and safety, now felt like a maze filled with memories he could not escape. He was assigned again to the inner section. The carved doors, the heavy walls, the low voices, everything returned like a repeating scene. This time he felt ready, or at least more aware. He knew now that the truth was real, not a trick of his mind. As he stood at his post, he focused on his breathing, steady and controlled. Still, his heart reacted whenever someone passed. He wondered if they would appear again. He wondered if fate would bring them face to face. During a quiet moment, another guard approached him. The man was younger and often tried to learn from him. He spoke softly, careful not to break protocol. He mentioned how the inner section felt tense lately, how even the staff seemed uneasy. The guard listened but said little. He did not trust his voice enough to speak freely. He simply nodded, letting the conversation end. He could not explain the weight he carried, and he would not try. Later that day, he overheard a quiet exchange between two officials. They spoke of old records, long-kept truths, and matters that had been hidden for years. The guard did not turn his head, but every word reached him clearly. He realized then that the truth was larger than he had imagined. It was not only about him. It touched lives beyond his own. The past he had tried to forget had been shaping the present all along. This understanding brought a new kind of struggle. His loyalty to the palace was strong. It had given him purpose when he had nothing else. Yet his loyalty to truth, to what was right, pulled at him from another direction. At night, alone in his quarters, he wrestled with his thoughts. He asked himself what his duty truly meant. Was it only about standing guard and following orders? Or was it also about protecting what was honest and fair? He thought of the person he had seen. They walked the palace halls now, unaware of his presence, unaware of the past they shared. He wondered if they carried the same unanswered questions, the same quiet pain. The guard considered speaking, revealing himself, explaining everything, but fear stopped him. Fear of reopening old wounds, fear of causing harm instead of healing. Fear of being seen not as a protector but as a reminder of a painful past. One evening, while standing near a window overlooking the palace grounds, he watched the sky change colors. The sun sank slowly, painting the world in soft light. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to feel sadness fully. He realized how much he had lost by choosing silence all those years ago. He had believed that distance would protect everyone. Now he questioned that belief. The next day brought another test. He was asked to deliver a message to a private chamber within the inner section. It was a simple task, yet his chest tightened as he recognized the location. It was near the area where he had seen the person before. He walked carefully, every step measured. When he reached the chamber, he stopped outside the door and waited. His hands felt heavy. His heart beat loudly in his ears. A voice from inside told him to enter. He stepped in, keeping his eyes lowered as protocol required. The room was quiet, filled with soft light. He delivered the message clearly and respectfully. Then he looked up. The person stood there. This time they faced each other directly. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. The guard felt the years between them stretch wide and heavy. He searched their face for recognition, but found only polite curiosity. They thanked him calmly and turned away. The guard bowed and stepped back, leaving the room. The door closed behind him, sealing in the moment. As he returned to his post, his legs felt weak. He leaned slightly against the wall, steadying himself. That short encounter had confirmed what he feared most. The past could not be erased by time alone. He spent the rest of his shift deep in thought. The choice before him grew clearer, yet no easier. He could continue as he was, silent and unseen, allowing history to remain buried. Or he could find a way to bring understanding, even if it came at a personal cost. That night he sat alone in his quarters once more. The silence felt different now. Less like protection, more like a challenge. He knew that a decision was coming. The truth would not wait forever. Sooner or later it would demand to be acknowledged. As he prepared for sleep, he made a quiet promise to himself. Whatever he chose, it would not be out of fear. It would be guided by honesty and care. The guard did not yet know how he would act, but he knew this much. The balance between duty and truth could not remain unsettled for long. And when the moment came, his choice would define not only his future, but the meaning of everything he had stood for all these years. The morning arrived quietly, as if the palace itself was holding its breath. The guard woke before the bell, his eyes already open. He lay still for a moment, listening to the distant sounds of the building coming to life. For the first time in many years, he did not feel the urge to hide from his thoughts. They were heavy, yes, but clear. He rose and prepared for duty with the same care as always. The uniform felt familiar, steadying. As he adjusted his cap, he looked at his reflection. The face staring back at him was calm but softer than before. Not weaker, just more human. When he stepped into the corridor, the air felt lighter. He walked with purpose, not just habit. He knew what he needed to do, even if the path ahead was uncertain. His assignment that day took him through the inner section again. The carved doors stood where they always had, solid and silent. He took his position and stood tall. People passed, some greeting him with polite nods. Life continued, unaware of the quiet decision forming within him. As the hours passed, he watched the light shift along the walls. He noticed small details he had ignored before, the gentle sound of fabric moving, the rhythm of footsteps, the way voices softened in certain places. The palace felt less like a fortress now, and more like a place filled with lives, each carrying its own hidden weight. Near midday, the person from his past appeared at the far end of the corridor. The guard recognized them instantly. This time his heart did not race. He felt a calm certainty instead. They walked closer, speaking softly with an attendant. When they passed him, something unexpected happened. They paused. Their eyes met his. For a brief second, time seemed to slow. The guard held his posture, respectful and still. He saw a flicker of recognition cross their face, uncertain, searching. They studied him as if sensing something familiar they could not name. Then they moved on. The guard exhaled slowly. That small moment was enough. He did not need words right then. He needed understanding, and that understanding had begun. Later that afternoon, he was relieved from his post earlier than usual. Instead of returning to his quarters, he walked toward a quiet section of the palace gardens. Guards were allowed there during off hours, and few people passed through at that time. He stood near a stone bench beneath a tree, watching leaves move gently in the breeze. The open sky above him felt different from the palace ceilings. It reminded him of the life he had once known, and the man he had been before duty became his shield. He did not wait long. Footsteps approached along the path. He turned slightly and saw them again, the person who carried his past within their present. They stopped a short distance away, surprised to see him there. For a moment, neither spoke. Then the guard bowed respectfully, as protocol demanded. When he straightened, he spoke quietly, choosing his words with care. He did not reveal everything. He did not speak of blame or regret. He spoke only of truth, gently and briefly, enough to open a door without pushing it too hard. The person listened, their expression changing from confusion to understanding. They asked questions, not sharply, but with a need for clarity. The guard answered honestly, without emotion clouding his voice. Silence followed. In that silence, something shifted. Years of distance softened. Pain did not disappear, but it lost its sharp edge. They did not solve the past in that moment. They did not promise anything. What they shared was something simpler and stronger: acknowledgement. They parted calmly, each carrying a new understanding forward. When the guard returned to his quarters that evening, he felt tired in a way that was not heavy. It was the tiredness that follows honesty, not fear. He removed his uniform and sat by the window, watching the palace lights come on one by one. He thought about his years of service, about the strength it took to stand silent, and about the courage it took to finally speak. He realized that composure was not the absence of feeling. It was the balance between duty and truth. The next days passed smoothly. He returned to his post, carrying out his responsibilities with the same dedication as before. But those who looked closely might have noticed a change. His eyes were clearer. His presence felt steadier, not rigid. The palace remained a place of routine and order, but for him, it had become something more. It was a place where the past had finally been faced, not with force but with care. He did not seek recognition. He did not expect forgiveness. What he had gained was quieter than that, a sense of peace he had not known in years. One evening, as he stood at the gate during a gentle sunset, a younger guard approached him and asked how he stayed so calm all the time. The guard considered the question carefully. Then he answered simply that calm did not come from hiding feelings. It came from understanding them. The younger guard nodded, not fully grasping the meaning but sensing its weight. As night settled over the palace, the guard stood at his post, steady and composed. The walls around him held many secrets, but his own no longer felt like a burden. He had lost his composure once, quietly, inside his heart. And by facing that moment with honesty, he had found a deeper kind of strength, one that would remain with him long after the palace lights dimmed and the corridors fell silent.